The church bells of Steedy Mary's Cathedral rang out across downtown Portland like a celebration of love, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heartbreak echoing in the empty apartment where I sat, still in my pajamas, watching my brother's wedding through social media posts from guests who had no idea I was supposed to be there. My phone buzzed with notifications, photos of the bride in her designer gown, videos of my father walking her down the aisle, snapshots of a family celebration that had been carefully curated to erase me from existence. 28 years of being David's sister, and I had been reduced to a ghost that no one was allowed to mention. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was watching my own erasure in real time, seeing my relatives smile and pose for pictures while pretending that David had always been an only child. My stepmother Rebecca had orchestrated this masterpiece of manipulation with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony, and everyone had fallen in line with her version of our family's story. But there was one person at that wedding who hadn't been coached on the new family narrative. One person who still remembered bedtime stories and Saturday morning pancakes, who still believed that love was louder than lies. My 4-year-old niece Emma, David's daughter from his first marriage, had no idea that she was about to become the voice of truth in a room full of people who had forgotten what honesty looked like. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. It started 2 years ago when Dad married Rebecca, a woman who smiled like sunshine and spoke like honey but had the calculating mind of a chess master. She was everything my late mother wasn't: polished where Mom had been natural, strategic where Mom had been spontaneous, cold where Mom had been warm. "She's good for your father," David had told me after their engagement, but I could see the doubt in his eyes even as he said the words. "He's been lonely since Mom died." I tried to be welcoming. I really did. I invited Rebecca to lunch, included her in family group chats, even helped plan Dad's surprise birthday party. But nothing I did was ever quite right in her eyes. My gift was too expensive showing off, then too modest not caring enough. My stories about our childhood made Dad smile, but Rebecca would always find a way to redirect the conversation to her own experiences, her own family, her own version of what family should look like. The first red flag came when she suggested that Dad's house needed updating, which meant removing every trace of our mother from the walls. The family photos that had hung in the hallway for decades were replaced with new ones featuring Rebecca prominently. Mom's garden was torn up and replanted with flowers Rebecca preferred. Even Mom's recipe box disappeared from the kitchen counter. "It's time to move forward," Rebecca told Dad when he hesitated about packing away Mom's things. "You can't live in the past forever." But erasing the past wasn't enough for Rebecca. She wanted to rewrite the future too. Family dinners became less frequent, and when they did happen, I found myself feeling like a guest in my childhood home rather than a daughter. Rebecca had a way of making subtle comments that made me question my place in the family. Little jokes about how some people never seemed to move on, observations about how certain family members always seemed to bring up sad memories. David started calling less. Dad seemed distant. And slowly, I began to realize that I was being written out of my own family story. The wedding planning revealed Rebecca's true masterpiece. What started as a small, intimate ceremony somehow grew into a 200-person celebration that included Rebecca's extended family, college friends, and co-workers, but mysteriously had no room for David's sister. "It's just that Rebecca's family is so large," Dad explained when I asked about my invitation, his voice carrying the rehearsed quality of someone repeating words that weren't his own. "And David wants to keep things simple, focused on the new chapter they're starting together." New chapter, as if our family's history was something to be closed and forgotten rather than honored and continued. "What about Emma?" I asked, referring to David's 4-year-old daughter who had been the light of our family since her birth. "She'll be there, right?" "Of course," Dad said quickly. "She's the flower girl. At least Emma would be there." Sweet, innocent Emma, who still called me Auntie Sarah and asked when I was coming to visit every time David brought her to see Dad. Emma, who had no idea that the adults in her life were playing a complicated game of family politics that she was too young to understand. The final insult came 3 days before the wedding when I received a text from David, not a call, not a face-to-face conversation, but a text message that felt like a knife to the heart. "Sarah, I know this is hard to understand, But Rebecca thinks it would be better if you didn't come to the wedding. She's worried about drama, and I just want her to be happy on our special day. I hope you understand." I stared at that message for an hour, reading it over and over again, trying to find some hidden meaning that would make it hurt less. But there was no hidden meaning. My brother, the boy I had protected from bullies and helped with homework and celebrated every achievement with, had chosen his new wife's comfort over his sister's presence at the most important day of his life. I wasn't just uninvited, I was unwanted. The night before the wedding, I sat in my apartment surrounded by photo albums that told the story Rebecca was trying to erase. Pictures of David and me as children, building snow forts and sharing ice cream cones. Photos from his first wedding, where I had been his best woman because he said no one knew him better than his big sister. Images of Emma's first birthday, where she had reached for me with chocolate-covered fingers and called me auntie for the first time. How do you mourn the death of a relationship with someone who's still alive? How do you grieve the loss of a family that still exists but no longer includes you? I called my best friend Lisa, who had watched his slow-motion family destruction with growing anger. "You should show up anyway," she said. "It's your brother's wedding. You have every right to be there and cause a scene. Give Rebecca exactly what she wants, proof that I'm the dramatic, unstable sister who can't respect boundaries." "Sarah, you've been respecting boundaries that shouldn't exist. You've been so afraid of being labeled as difficult that you've let them push you out of your own family." She was right, but knowing she was right didn't make it easier. I had spent 2 years trying to be the perfect sister, the accommodating daughter, the family member who never rocked the boat. And where had it gotten me? Sitting alone on the night before my brother's wedding, wondering if I had imagined 28 years of sibling love. The hardest part was knowing that Emma would be looking for me. She was too young to understand why Auntie Sarah wasn't there, too innocent to accept the adult explanations about complicated family situations and what's best for everyone. In her 4-year-old world, family meant the people who loved you, and love meant showing up. I fell asleep that night clutching a photo of Emma and me from last Christmas, when she had insisted I help her build a gingerbread house because Auntie makes everything more fun. Tomorrow, she would learn that sometimes the people you love most can disappoint you in ways that change everything. The wedding day arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that makes photographers weep with joy. Golden sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Cathedral, casting rainbow patterns across the white silk aisle runner where Rebecca would soon make her grand entrance. I watched it all unfold through the live stream that the church offered for family members who couldn't attend, a service that felt like it had been designed specifically for people like me, the unwanted relatives who were allowed to witness but not participate in their own family's milestones. The guests filed in wearing their Sunday best, faces I recognized from decades of family gatherings. My Aunt Margaret, who had helped raise David and me after Mom got sick. My cousin James, who had been David's best man at his first wedding. Family friends who had watched us grow up, who had attended my college graduation and celebrated my promotions, who were now sitting in pews pretending that David had always been an only child. Dad walked Rebecca down the aisle, his face beaming with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen since before Mom's diagnosis. Rebecca looked stunning in her ivory gown, her smile radiant as she nodded to guests and posed for the photographer who captured every moment of her perfect day. David stood at the altar in his black tuxedo, looking handsome and nervous and completely transformed from the brother I had known. This version of David belonged to Rebecca now, had been molded into her vision of what a husband should be: successful, compliant, and unburdened by inconvenient family loyalties. And then I saw her, Emma, my beautiful niece, walking down the aisle in a pale pink dress with a basket of rose petals, her dark curls bouncing with each careful step. She was taking her job as flower girl very seriously, concentrating on scattering the petals just right, but I could see her eyes scanning the crowd. She was looking for me. Even through the pixelated live stream, I could see the confusion on her small face as she searched the pews for the aunt who had never missed an important moment in her young life. The aunt who had taught her to braid friendship bracelets and make shadow puppets and believe that family meant forever. My heart broke watching her look for someone who wasn't there, Someone who should have been there. Someone who had been deliberately excluded from this moment that would shape her understanding of family for years to come. The ceremony proceeded with clockwork precision. The pastor spoke about love and commitment. The couple exchanged vows that sounded like they had been written by a greeting card company, and the photographer captured every staged moment of Rebecca's perfect wedding. I was about to close my laptop, unable to watch any more of my own erasure, when the pastor asked if anyone had any objections to the union. It was a formality. Of course, no one objects at weddings anymore, especially not at carefully orchestrated events like this one where every guest had been hand-selected for their compliance. The sanctuary fell silent except for the soft whisper of expensive fabric and the distant sound of traffic outside. Rebecca's smile was triumphant. Dad looked proud, and David seemed relieved that they were almost at the finish line of this elaborate performance. And then, cutting through the reverent silence like a bell in the night, came the clear, confused voice of a 4-year-old who had finally reached her breaking point. "Where's Auntie Sarah?" Emma's voice carried across the cathedral with the kind of clarity that only children possess when they're asking the questions that adults are too polite to voice. Every head turned toward the flower girl, who was standing near the altar with her empty basket, her small face scrunched up in the kind of confusion that comes from a world that suddenly doesn't make sense. The music, which had been playing softly in the background, faltered as the organist's hands hesitated on the keys. The photographer lowered his camera. Even the pastor seemed unsure how to proceed. "Where's Auntie Sarah?" Emma asked again, louder this time, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "She's supposed to be here. She promised she would always come to important things." Rebecca's perfect smile flickered like a candle in the wind. David's face went pale. Dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. But Emma wasn't finished. With the fearless honesty that only children possess, she turned to face the congregation, her small voice growing stronger with each word. "Daddy, why isn't Annie here? Did something bad happen to her? Is she sick?" The silence that followed was deafening. 200 guests sat frozen in their pews, witnessing a 4-year-old child expose the ugly truth that all the adults had agreed to ignore. The live stream captured every moment, Rebecca's mask slipping, David's guilt written across his face, the collective discomfort of a congregation that had suddenly been forced to confront their complicity in a family's destruction. "She always comes to important things," Emma continued, tears starting to roll down her cheeks. "She came to my birthday and Christmas and when I was in the hospital. Why isn't she here for Daddy's wedding?" The question hung in the air like an accusation, demanding an answer that no one was prepared to give. How do you explain to a child that love can be conditional, that family can be negotiable, that sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who hurt you most? Emma's innocent question had done what months of adult conversation couldn't accomplish. It had forced everyone in that room to see the truth they had been avoiding. The wedding continued, but the spell had been broken. The pastor hurried through the remaining vows. The kiss was brief and awkward, and the recessional felt more like an escape than a celebration. Emma walked back down the aisle still crying, still asking for her Auntie Sarah, still unable to understand why the adults couldn't give her a simple answer. The reception was a disaster of whispered conversations and uncomfortable silences. Guests who had known me for decades suddenly found themselves questioning their own complicity in my exclusion. Aunt Margaret cornered Dad at the bar, demanding to know why I wasn't there. Cousin James refused to give a toast, saying he couldn't celebrate a union that required erasing family members. But the real reckoning came when David found Emma hiding under the gift table, clutching her flower basket and sobbing for the aunt who wasn't there. "Daddy, did Auntie Sarah stop loving us?" she asked, her small voice breaking his heart in ways that adult guilt couldn't touch. That's when David finally understood what he had done. He had traded his sister's love for his wife's approval, sacrificed a lifetime of family bonds for the promise of a peaceful marriage. And his daughter, his innocent, honest daughter, had paid the price for his cowardice. My phone rang at 11:47 p.m. David's name appeared on the screen, and for a moment, I considered not answering. But Emma's voice echoed in my memory, and I picked up. "Sarah," he said, his voice thick with tears. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." 3 months later, Emma and I were building another gingerbread house, this time in my apartment where she comes to visit every weekend. David is in therapy, learning to set boundaries with Rebecca. Dad has started calling again, slowly rebuilding the bridge that Rebecca tried to burn. Sometimes it takes the innocent voice of a child to remind us that family isn't about keeping peace, it's about keeping faith with the people who love you unconditionally. Emma taught us all that love doesn't stay silent when injustice is dressed up as happiness. If this story reminded you that children see truth more clearly than adults, that family bonds shouldn't be negotiable, subscribe and share this with someone who needs to remember that love speaks up for what's right. There are truths that only innocent hearts dare to voice, and this is one of them.